Hi there, this is Lisa Sutterer, Curriculum Director of Social Studies Success, and I'm here to talk to you about the lesson called Changes in Culture During the Era of Reform. Now, this is a lesson when I was teaching 8th grade that I would often skip because it had content like Henry David Thoreau and Transcendentalism and the Hudson School of Art, and oftentimes I would think, that's for the language arts teacher, and I would think of the era of reform as more about the abolitionist movement or the women's rights movement, and that's true. But it turns out that every year on the STAR test, there's at least anywhere from 1 to 3 questions that relate to this exact content. So let's take a look at this lesson. First, you're going to find a nice, handy direction sheet. Prior to the lesson, these are the things that you'll need to do in terms of printing out WordWall terms and picture prediction cards and content readings and notes and exit tickets. I would say this is a pretty low maintenance preparation lesson. The only real time-consuming task might be when you print out these 16 cards for each pair of students. You have to cut those up and put them in a baggie or an envelope. But you've got them now for other years ahead. And then when you get to the day of the lesson, don't forget to really pay attention to this right here. This is going to be a link for a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that will guide you through each stage of the lesson. And it's great in the sense that if you don't have a lot of time, this lesson I'm guessing would take about maybe a day and a half of a 90-minute period. Maybe you don't have as much time. You could cut and paste sort of and take out certain parts if you need to. So you can do that. You can hide those slides or you can insert some of your own slides. So that's nice and helpful. So let's take a look at an overview of the lesson. There's going to be some vocabulary instruction. Then we're going to move to picture predictions, which is a great building schema activity for your students so that then when they get to the content readings, they've already been exposed to much of that. And then it'll finish off with notes and an exit ticket. And notice the 4 major topics: the Second Great Awakening, Transcendentalism, Utopian Societies, and Hudson River Artists. All right. Our first step in our instruction is vocabulary instruction. So let's take a look at the terms. There's 4 terms that you'll want to emphasize throughout the lesson, and they'll be emphasized throughout the content readings. And we've got utopia, then we've got communal living, then we've got transcendentalism, and revival. So these will come up regularly. So the first thing I want to do is print them out in color and place them at the front of your classroom, and then bring your students up to the front of the classroom, standing up, and you're going to be touching the word and saying the word, and then they repeat after you: utopia, utopia. So they're sounding out that word. And then the next part of our vocabulary instruction is going to be what we call a 3-2-1. And I would have students get into pairs and assign them with one of the 4 words, and then give them 3 sticky notes. And in these sticky notes, they're going to talk and jot down 3 things that they see, 2 actions or senses, like what do I smell or hear, and then 1 definition. They're going to go in that order. So if I was talking with my partner, it might sound something like this: oh, wow, I see these beautiful mountains, and then this valley that is not very well populated, so it's all spread out and some housing along the way. Senses, I might smell the mountain air, and I might be able to touch the rocks and the pine trees. And then the definition, gosh, this really just feels like a beautiful place to live. Should our definition be utopia, a perfect, beautiful place to be? And then your students will place those 3-2-1 sticky notes on that term that they defined. And then you as a teacher can go up and see what they came up with, and that will help guide your instruction and kind of give you heads up as to which words are going to maybe need a little more attention. All right, so then after we've done some of that vocabulary instruction, we're going to move to picture predictions. Okay, so when you print these out, they're going to look like 4 pages of 4 cards that'll end up being cut out and mixed up and put into baggies. And so you're going to get your students into this pairs, maybe the same pairs from the vocabulary activity. And they're going to have all these cards, and they're going to try to set out the ones with images and then the text. And the text comes directly from the actual content readings. So some of these are going to be more obvious than others, like Hudson River School artists were known for their meticulous attention to detail and realism. Fauna and flora, plants and animals. Oh, wow, that looks pretty darn detailed. So that must go together. Some not so obvious, like this one. The Second Great Awakening led to Methodists, Baptists, and Mormons, as well as the growth of African American Christian denominations. So students are going to have to tap into some of their background knowledge and go, oh, that's a church, and it's just a church. Oh, these are new churches, whereas this one will be a utopia society. So a little less obvious, but it gets them to look at images and connect details to text. Okay. So that's the picture prediction part of the lesson. Then you can check their answers. The presentation has a nice slide that allows you to do that. Now it's time to get into the content readings. And the first set is the Second Great Awakening. And it's about 2 pages. And depending upon your students and your level of comfort, you could either have them read in as individuals, pairs, or as a class, because some of these concepts are a little less familiar and a little more opaque. But then there's some tasks that each page has for the student to do. So this one is just one, highlight the one most important sentence on this page. So they're looking for a main idea. Then you move on to the second page, and the task is Fast 5, highlight 5 key ideas from page 1 and 2. And so what that ends up looking like is this. You've got a main idea and supporting details. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next part of the content of this lesson is about transcendentalism. Notice that the text is 1 page, so it doesn't usually go beyond that. And it has just some key features of transcendentalism and a text. Choose 2 paragraphs and create a hashtag summary for each one. So for example, nature lover, hashtag nature lover. So students in pairs would get together and use a real, common way of summarizing content and a fun way to do that with the hashtag activity. So here's some examples: individualism, my choice, be your own person, nature, hashtag Walden vibes, hashtag live simply, social reform, hashtag do the right thing. So that'd be a fun kind of way for students to summarize text. The next part of transcendentalism is to get them to look at some primary sources. So you've got Henry David Thoreau, and you've got Ralph Waldo Emerson, and these are direct quotes from them. And the directions say, color code these quotes, highlight them according to individualism, nature, self-reliance, and social reform. So those are those 4 categories of ways, characteristics of describing transcendentalism. So students in pairs will really wrestle with some of these because they overlap, really, especially individualism and self-reliance. And that's okay. That's great to get them to think deeply. But this is kind of, in the end, what their papers would look like. And then you can talk about those as a class. After transcendentalism comes utopian societies. And once again, a very short text with 3 examples of some utopian societies in the mid-1800s. And then the task here is to doodle it, create a quick sketch of a utopian society. So that gets them to picture that and create a graphic summary of utopian society. So it might look something like this with some stick figures. The next topic and final topic is the Hudson River School of Art. And they too had, as artists, 3 characteristics that they focused on when they were doing their painting in this era: celebration of nature, realism, nationalistic themes. They correlate a lot with transcendental themes. And so you read this, and on the painting above, circle and label details that show those 3 characteristics. So this is the part where you'd want to model together as a teacher with them, and you could say, hey, I really noticed all this light shining over the land. That seems like, something's good is going on. Maybe nationalism is at play there. These reflections of the trees in the water, that's real that's really realism. And all of these nature features like waterfalls and lakes and mountains and trees. Now, as you can see, some of this overlaps as well, so it can be interpreted, with a little bit of nuance there. Then the next part is to take 5 other Hudson School of Art paintings. And, at first glance, a lot of times we'll look at a painting like this and we'll go, oh, it's pretty, and then move on because it doesn't have a lot of action in it. But there's actually a lot going on in these kind of nature-oriented paintings. So the directions for this is to get students to really look deeply at these paintings and see what the artist was intending, what kind of messages. So on each of the paintings, they're going to circle and label 3 details and then record nature, realism, or nationalism to signify what the painting seems to be suggesting the most. Again, sometimes these are up for interpretations. But in the end, this is kind of what one example could look like of a student's example. So you notice how students would be circling and really actually spending time with the image and analyzing art as a way of identifying these characteristics and features that correlate so much with the overall theme of transcendentalism. In case you're wondering, hey, I don't know if my students in a black and white copy would be able to, see all those details, the lesson includes nice, large examples of those exact same paintings. You could also have your students go on to the internet and find those images and zoom in, and that's a really great way to get them to even go deeper into analyzing the images. It's now time to wrap it all up, and you could choose between doing both notes and the exit ticket, or just the notes, or just the exit ticket. This is a nice way of having them go back to their readings and identify, just sort of a quick summary of these parts and pieces of the major parts of this changes in culture lesson. You could also circle back to the hashtag summary and maybe have them create hashtags for each one of these. The other part of our end of lesson is an exit ticket, which then reads there's a statement about this lesson, and they have to identify one of these major subparts of the lesson. Here's a key, and just a note. Part of this lesson has another version of it, an EB-friendly version, where we've taken the text and pared it down even more and made sure that some of the terms and vocabulary used are accessible. They look the same, essentially. They have the same directions as the traditional lesson, and they also have, in one point, a version it's a little more doable for students who might have a hard time with these primary source quotes. In this case, this is laid out a little bit differently. Here's the actual quote, here's the student-friendly version, and then there's just an option to circle one of those. So that makes that a little more accessible for some students. All right, so that's the lesson. I hope you enjoy teaching that and realizing that this is content that will be covered on the STAR test. Happy teaching.